I woke up groggy, disoriented, still half lost between dreams and reality. The lights above me were too bright, the room too quiet. At first, I thought everything had gone as planned, that this was just another day I would eventually forget. Then I felt it, a tightness across my skin that didn't belong there. When I lifted the blanket and saw the scar, long and angry and real, my heart dropped in a way I didn't know was possible. No one had warned me, no one had asked me. They said it was for my good. I trusted them. I always had. When they told me not to worry, I didn't. When they said it was necessary, I believed them. I had been taught that love meant obedience, that care sometimes came disguised as control. Lying there staring at that scar, I realized how fragile trust really is, how easily it can be shaped, bent, and finally broken by the very hands meant to protect you. I asked questions, but the answers came slowly, carefully edited, wrapped in excuses. They spoke of fear, of responsibility, of making the hard choices so I wouldn't have to. But what they never spoke about was consent. What they never admitted was how small and powerless I felt, waking up to a decision that would stay with me forever. The scar wasn't just on my body. It was carved into my sense of safety, into the way I looked at the people I once relied on without doubt. For a long time, I tried to convince myself it didn't matter, that scars fade, that time heals everything. But every time I caught my reflection, it reminded me of the truth they hid from me. It reminded me that being cared for should never mean being erased, that protection should never require silence, and that love, real love, does not take choices away and call it kindness. What they didn't know was that the scar would do something they never expected. It would wake me up. It would teach me to ask questions, to listen to my instincts, to claim ownership of my own body and my own life. The truth hurt, but it also gave me something powerful, clarity. I stopped confusing control with concern. I stopped mistaking fear for love. Now, when I look at that scar, I no longer see just betrayal. I see a turning point, a moment when I learned that my voice matters, even when it's uncomfortable for others to hear. They said it was for my good, but the truth I learned that day is this: nothing is truly for your good if it takes your choice away. I trusted them without hesitation because trust is something you're taught long before you learn how fragile it is. From the time I was young, I believed that the people who raised me would never choose anything that could hurt me. I believed that love automatically meant protection, that guidance always came from a place of care, and that authority existed to keep me safe. That belief followed me into the hospital room, onto the operating table, and into the moment I closed my eyes, convinced that whatever happened next was necessary and harmless. I didn't question it, because trust doesn't ask for proof. Trust assumes. When I woke up, everything felt unfamiliar. My body felt heavier, slower, like it no longer fully belonged to me. At first, I thought the discomfort was normal, just another side effect of anesthesia. Then I noticed the tight pull across my skin, the dull ache that didn't make sense. Seeing the scar was like having the air knocked out of my chest. It wasn't just shock, it was confusion mixed with disbelief. Something had been done to me that I hadn't agreed to, something permanent, something that could never be undone. In that instant, trust cracked, not loudly, but deeply. I wanted an explanation that would make it hurt less. I wanted words that could turn the scar into something reasonable, something justified. They told me it was for my good. They said they were afraid, that they were trying to protect me, that they knew better. Those words sounded familiar, almost comforting, because they were the same words I had accepted my whole life. But this time, they didn't fit. This time, they couldn't erase the feeling that something sacred had been crossed. Trust, once broken, doesn't shatter all at once. It erodes slowly, leaving behind questions that never quite go away. What hurt the most wasn't just the scar itself, but the realization that my voice had been removed from the decision. I wasn't included in something that directly affected my body, my future, my sense of self. Trust depends on respect, and respect requires acknowledgement. Lying there, I understood how easily love can become control when someone decides they know what's best without listening. I began to see that trust without boundaries isn't safety, it's vulnerability waiting to be exploited, even unintentionally. After that day, everything changed in small, quiet ways. Conversations felt different. I listened more closely, not just to what was said, but to what was avoided. I noticed how often decisions were justified without discussion, how fear was used as a reason to override choice. The scar became a reminder, not just of what happened, but of how trust can be shaped by power. When someone holds authority over you, their version of good can easily replace your right to decide. There were moments when I blamed myself for trusting so completely. I wondered if being obedient, quiet, and agreeable had made it easier for others to decide on my behalf. But trust isn't a weakness, it's a human instinct, a natural response to care and familiarity. The fault wasn't in trusting, but in having that trust taken for granted. Real trust grows when questions are allowed, when consent is respected, when care includes honesty instead of secrecy. Over time, I realized that the scar forced me to grow in ways comfort never could. It taught me that trust should be mutual, not one-sided. That love doesn't demand silence. That being protected should never mean being excluded from your own life. I learned to ask questions, even when they made others uncomfortable. I learned to slow down my yes and listen to my unease. The scar stayed the same, but my understanding of trust didn't. Now when I think about trust, I no longer see it as blind faith. I see it as a choice that must be earned and maintained. Something living, something that requires honesty and respect to survive. What was taken from me that day can never be fully returned, but what I gained was awareness. Trust is powerful, but only when it's shared, not imposed. And once you learn that, you never give it away so easily again. Trust and confusion often walk hand in hand when the truth is hidden from you. I didn't understand that at first. I thought confusion was just fear, something that would fade once the pain settled and the days returned to normal. But confusion has weight. It lingers. It fills the silence with unanswered questions and forces your mind to search faith or meaning where none is freely given. When I woke up and saw the scar, my thoughts scattered in every direction. Nothing added up. The people I trusted most were standing there, calm, reassuring, acting as if everything had gone exactly as it should. Yet my body told a different story, one written in pain and permanence. They spoke softly, carefully choosing their words, explaining just enough to keep me from pushing too hard. They said it was necessary, that it was the safest option, that I would understand someday. Those explanations floated above me, never quite landing. Confusion isn't just not knowing, it's sensing that something important is being withheld. I felt it in the pauses between their sentences, in the way my questions were redirected instead of answered. Each half-truth deepened the fog, making it harder to trust what I was being told, and harder to trust myself for doubting them. At night, when the world went quiet, confusion grew louder. I replayed the moments leading up to the surgery, searching for a memory where I had agreed, where I had been informed. There was nothing. That absence became its own kind of answer. Confusion slowly transformed into awareness, and awareness into pain. It wasn't just about what had been done to my body, but about what had been taken from my understanding. When truth is hidden, the mind fills the gap with fear, guilt, and self-blame. I wondered if I had missed something, misunderstood something, or failed to speak up when I should have. Alongside confusion came the weight of trust unraveling. Trust doesn't disappear instantly. It weakens quietly, thread by thread. I started questioning small things, then bigger ones. Eve? Wry reassurance felt rehearsed. Every comforting phrase sounded like something practiced long before I woke up. The people who once felt like my anchor now felt distant, not because they changed, but because my perception did. Trust relies on transparency, and without it, even love begins to feel unsafe. I realized that confusion is often a sign that your intuition is awake. It's the mind's way of saying something isn't right, even when the heart wants to believe otherwise. Ignoring that feeling only deepens the wound. I tried to silence it, telling myself they meant well, that their intentions were pure. But intentions don't erase impact. Good intentions don't undo the harm caused by secrecy. Trust can't survive in the dark, no matter how gentle the hands that placed it there. As days passed, the scar became more than a physical mark. It symbolized the cost of trusting without understanding. I learned that trust without clarity creates dependence, not safety. When you're kept in the dark, you're expected to accept decisions without question, to surrender your agency in exchange for reassurance. That realization hurt more than the incision itself. It forced me to see how easily confusion can be used to maintain control, even unintentionally. Slowly, I began to reclaim my sense of reality by allowing myself to question what had happened. Confusion gave way to quiet strength. I stopped apologizing for wanting answers. I stopped doubting my right to know the truth about my own body. Trust, I learned, should never require confusion as its foundation. If something is truly for your good, it can withstand questions, explanations, and honesty. When truth is shared openly, confusion has no place to grow, and trust has a chance to heal instead of collapse. The body remembers what the mind was never told, even when words are carefully chosen to hide the truth. Long before I understood what had been done, my body reacted in ways my thoughts couldn't explain. There was a stiffness when I moved, a sharp reminder every time I breathed too deeply, a constant awareness that something had changed. I tried to reason it away, telling myself pain was temporary and explanations would come later. But the body doesn't wait for explanations. It holds on to what happened, storing it quietly, faithfully, even when the story given to you doesn't match the reality you feel. Every movement became a reminder. Sitting up, standing, turning in bed, each action carried a message my body refused to forget. While others spoke calmly about recovery and improvement, my body responded with hesitation, as if it no longer trusted the environment it was in. It flinched before my mind could reassure it. That's when I began to understand that memory isn't only stored in thoughts. It lives in muscle tension, in shallow breaths, in the instinctive need to protect a place that was once violated without permission. I noticed it most in moments of quiet. When there was nothing to distract me, my body spoke the loudest. The scar felt heavier at night, pulling not just at my skin but at my sense of safety. I would lie still, replaying nothing in particular, yet feeling everything. My body reacted as if it was still on that table, still vulnerable, still waiting for something to happen without warning. No explanation could calm that response, because the truth had never been part of the process. The body knew that people around me expected acceptance to come easily. They assumed that once the pain faded, everything else would follow. But the body doesn't measure time the same way the mind does. It doesn't forget just because days pass. It remembers shock, helplessness, and the moment control was taken away. Even when I tried to convince myself that it was done out of care, my body resisted that narrative. It responded to reality, not reassurance. There were moments when I felt disconnected from myself, like my body belonged to someone else. Looking at the scar didn't feel like looking at my own reflection. It felt like evidence of a decision made in my absence. That disconnect was my body's way of processing what my mind hadn't been allowed to. When choice is removed, the body absorbs the impact. It carries the weight of what wasn't said, what wasn't asked, what wasn't respected. Over time, I began to listen instead of fighting it. I paid attention to the tension, the hesitation, the discomfort that appeared without warning. I realized my body wasn't betraying me, it was protecting me. It was responding honestly in a situation where honesty had been withheld. The more I acknowledged that, the more I understood that healing isn't just about closing wounds, it's about restoring a sense of safety that was interrupted. The scar became a point of communication between my body and my awareness. It reminded me that something significant had happened, regardless of how gently it was explained afterward. My body didn't care about intentions or justifications. It responded to experience, and that experience taught it to be cautious, alert, and guarded. Those reactions weren't weaknesses, they were signals. In learning to respect those signals, I stopped dismissing my own reactions. I stopped telling myself I was overreacting or being ungrateful. The body doesn't exaggerate, it responds precisely to what it has endured. By accepting that, I began to reclaim a sense of ownership over myself. My body remembered the truth before I was ready to face it, and in doing so, it gave me a language deeper than words, one that couldn't be rewritten or denied. Healing begins when the truth is faced, even when that truth is painful and difficult to accept. For a long time, I tried to ignore what had happened, convincing myself that time would erase the scar and soften the memories attached to it. I told myself that understanding the intentions behind the actions was enough, that if they meant well, then somehow it would all be okay. But healing doesn't work like that. The mind can try to justify, the heart can try to forgive, but the body and the deeper self know the truth. True healing requires seeing the situation as it was, not as you wish it had been. Facing the truth was not easy. It meant acknowledging that the people I trusted most had made decisions over my life and my body without my consent. It meant admitting that what they called protection was, in fact, control disguised as care. That realization brought anger, confusion, and grief all at once. I had to sit with those emotions without trying to push them away or minimize them. Every time I looked at the scar, I remembered that moment of waking up and the shock of realizing that my autonomy had been taken from me. Accepting that truth was the first step toward reclaiming it. The process of confronting the truth forced me to reflect deeply on my own voice and my own choices. I began asking questions I had avoided before. I began examining my feelings, not just for the actions that had been done to me, but for my own responses. I realized that part of me had been conditioned to stay silent, to accept decisions without protest. Facing the truth meant breaking that pattern. It meant allowing myself to feel everything I had been told to ignore: fear, frustration, disappointment, and even betrayal. These feelings were uncomfortable, but they were necessary. They were proof that I was alive and aware, proof that I could no longer allow others to define my boundaries for me. Healing also meant reclaiming a sense of control that had been taken. Once I acknowledged the truth, I started making decisions for myself in small, deliberate ways. I listened to my body, I honored my feelings, and I refused to let anyone else decide what was acceptable or not for me. Every choice I made reinforced the lesson that healing is not passive, it is active. It requires courage, persistence, and honesty with yourself. The scar on my body became a symbol not just of what had been done, but of what I had survived. It reminded me daily that acknowledging reality, no matter how painful, is what allows growth to begin. Confronting the truth also taught me about boundaries and respect. I realized that true care cannot exist without transparency, that love cannot demand obedience in the name of protection, and that respect is meaningless if it doesn't honor the autonomy of the person it claims to safeguard. Facing the truth meant setting boundaries that I had never set before. It meant refusing to let silence or secrecy define my relationships. It meant learning to trust cautiously, knowing that trust must be earned, not assumed. Through this process, I learned that the road to healing is intertwined with awareness, courage, and the willingness to confront reality head-on. Slowly, as I faced the truth, the emotional weight of the scar lessened, not because the wound disappeared, but because I had begun to reclaim the story for myself. Healing is not forgetting, it is remembering with clarity, with acknowledgement, and with the intention to move forward without surrendering your sense of self. Each day became an act of reclaiming my life, my body, and my voice. Facing the truth allowed me to transform pain into understanding, vulnerability into strength, and betrayal into a lesson that I would carry with me, not as a mark of weakness, but as proof of resilience.